From a hostage rescue that turned into a flaming pile of wreckage in the middle of the desert, to the raid that took out the most wanted man on Earth, but maybe should have happened a decade earlier. These are the most controversial special ops missions in US history. And some of them are so jaw-dropping, you'll be asking yourself one question. Who on earth signed off on this? Black Hawk Down, the Battle of Mogadishu, 1993. Let's start with the one you've probably seen the movie about, but the movie didn't show you everything. It's October 3rd, 1993. Somalia is a failed state. Warlord Mohammed Farah Aidid is starving his own people and ambushing UN aid convoys. So the US sends in Delta Force and Army Rangers to snatch two of his top lieutenants out of the middle of Mogadishu, in broad daylight, in one of the most hostile cities on Earth. The plan? Get in, grab the guys, be back in time for dinner. The whole thing was supposed to take 30 minutes. It took 18 hours. Two Black Hawk helicopters were shot down by RPGs. Soldiers rappelled into an ambush. The streets turned into a kill zone. And suddenly, Delta operators and Rangers found themselves pinned down overnight in the middle of a city where every alley had a gun pointed at them. By the time it was over, 18 Americans were dead and 73 were wounded. An estimated 300 to 1,000 Somali fighters and civilians were killed, and the image that the whole world saw? An American soldier's body being dragged through the streets. Sheesh. Now, to be fair, the mission technically succeeded. They captured the targets, but the political fallout was catastrophic. President Clinton pulled US forces out of Somalia within months. Critics called it a strategic disaster. Others said the military was set up to fail, sent in with Black Hawks, but denied the armored vehicles they'd specifically requested. And the legacy of Mogadishu still haunts US foreign policy to this day. Some historians argue Osama bin Laden watched the whole thing and concluded that America would cut and run when the body bags started coming home, which is a pretty dark setup for the next chapter. Tora Bora, 2001. Because just 2 months after 9/11, the US had Osama bin Laden cornered, literally cornered, in a cave complex in the mountains of eastern Afghanistan called Tora Bora. December 2001. US airstrikes have just obliterated the Taliban. Bin Laden and his fighters have retreated to this remote mountain fortress, and everyone knows he's there. CIA officers are on the ground. Afghan militias are moving in. Delta Force operators are calling in airstrikes. But here's the rub. There weren't enough boots on the ground. The US leaned on Afghan militias to do most of the fighting, and those militias, not exactly reliable. Some of them were cutting side deals, letting fighters slip through their lines at night. And on sometime mid-December, Osama bin Laden walked out of Tora Bora and disappeared into Pakistan. Just like that. Delta Force commanders on the ground had begged for more troops. They wanted US Rangers to seal the mountain passes. The request was denied. Why? Well, some argue that the Pentagon was already pivoting toward Iraq, and putting a massive US force into Afghanistan didn't fit the plan. Sir, he was right there. Bin Laden wouldn't be found again for nearly a decade. The war in Afghanistan would grind on for 20 more years, and over 2,400 American service members would die in that conflict, all because the mountain passes weren't sealed when they should have been. Senate investigators later concluded that Tora Bora was a definitive intelligence failure and a missed opportunity that fundamentally altered the course of history. Yeah, not great. But if you think Tora Bora was a tragedy of bad decisions from the top, the next operation is a tragedy of bad luck at the bottom. Operation Red Wings, 2005. Operation Red Wings is one of the most gut-wrenching stories in the history of U.S. Special Operations. June 2005. 4 Navy SEALs, Marcus Luttrell, Michael Murphy, Danny Dietz, and Matthew Axelson, are inserted into the mountains of Kunar Province, Afghanistan. Their mission? Locate and assess a Taliban commander named Ahmed Shah. They set up on a mountainside, and then 3 goat herds stumble right into their position, including a teenage boy. Now they've got a choice, a horrible one. Let them go and risk them reporting to the Taliban, or don't. They let them go. Less than an hour later, a significantly larger Taliban force swarmed the mountain. The firefight was brutal. All 3 of Luttrell's teammates were killed. A rescue helicopter was shot down by an RPG, killing all 16 men aboard, 8 of them SEALs. It became the single deadliest day in Navy SEAL history. Marcus Luttrell survived, rescued by an Afghan villager who invoked an ancient Pashtun code of hospitality called Pashtunwali. Basically, it means if you take someone in, you protect them with your life, no matter who's looking for them. Now here's where the controversy comes in. The mission had problems from the start. Intelligence underestimated enemy numbers by a massive margin. The insertion point may have been compromised, and communications gear failed at critical moments, cutting the team off from support. Some veterans and analysts argue the whole thing was a planning failure. Others say the team made the right call with the goat herds and were simply overwhelmed by bad luck. Either way, 19 Americans never came home, and the families deserve more than a debate. But speaking of controversies nobody wants to talk about, the Niger ambush, Tongo Tongo, 2017. This one shocked America because most people had no idea U.S. Special Forces were even in Niger. October 4th, 2017. A 12-man team of U.S. Special Forces and 30 Nigerian soldiers are on a routine patrol near the village of Tongo Tongo. No heavy weapons, light vehicles. Supposed to be a low-risk reconnaissance mission. Then, ISIS-affiliated fighters hit them hard. 4 American soldiers were killed. Sergeant David Johnson, Staff Sergeant Brian Black, Staff Sergeant Dustin Wright, and Staff Sergeant Jeremiah Johnson. Several others were wounded, and in the chaos, Sergeant David Johnson's body wasn't recovered until 2 days later. But here's the thing that blew up into a national firestorm. President Trump called Sergeant Johnson's widow, Maisha Johnson, to offer his condolences, and according to her and a congresswoman who was in the car, he told her her husband knew what he signed up for. Trump denied saying it. The story exploded, and suddenly the whole country was asking, wait, why do we have nearly 800 troops in Niger? What exactly are they doing there? And why did it take the military 48 hours to find one of our own? A Pentagon investigation later found serious failures in planning, intelligence, and oversight. The team was sent into an area with known ISIS activity without proper preparation, and critically, they were given the wrong threat assessment. Yeah, not great. Not great at all. Now, if you want the most controversial success in Special Ops history, this next one is it. Operation Neptune Spear, 2011. After nearly 10 years of hunting, CIA intelligence has located a suspicious compound in Abbottabad, Pakistan, a wealthy suburb right down the road from Pakistan's version of West Point. And living there, almost certainly, Osama bin Laden. President Obama gives the green light. 24 Navy SEALs from SEAL Team 6 are inserted by helicopter into Pakistan, in the dark, without telling Pakistan. That last part is important. Pakistan is technically a U.S. ally, but we did not call ahead. The raid went 40 minutes. Bin Laden was found on the 3rd floor of the compound and shot and killed. His body was flown out, identified by DNA, and buried at sea within 24 hours. Mission accomplished, sort of. Because the aftermath was a diplomatic earthquake. Pakistan was furious. Understandably so, a sovereign nation had just been violated by U.S. military forces, and immediately questions swirled. Did Pakistan know bin Laden was there? His compound was enormous. High walls, no internet, no phone lines, a few miles from the military academy. That's not exactly hiding in a cave. Then, the White House's story about the raid kept changing. First, there was a firefight. Then there wasn't. First, bin Laden used a woman as a human shield, then he didn't. Sure thing, guys. The one SEAL helicopter that crashed in the compound was a prototype stealth Black Hawk, technology the US had never publicly acknowledged. Pakistan recovered the tail section before the US could destroy it, and it almost certainly ended up in Chinese hands. So to recap, they got bin Laden, but the US may have accidentally handed China advanced stealth technology in the process, and a key ally was humiliated on the world stage. Still a win. Controversial win, but a win. But if Neptune Spear is the controversial success, the next operation is the catastrophic failure that changed everything. Operation Eagle Claw, 1980. It's April 1980. 52 American hostages are being held in the U.S. Embassy in Tehran. They've been there for 6 months. President Jimmy Carter has tried diplomacy. It's not working, so he authorizes a secret military rescue operation. The plan was insanely complicated. Delta Force would fly in on helicopters, drive into Tehran, storm the embassy, rescue 52 hostages, and fly everyone out. Simple, right? Sir, this was not simple. 8 RH-53 helicopters took off from a Navy carrier in the Gulf of Oman, but they had to fly through a massive, unexpected sandstorm called the Haboob that nobody had forecasted. 2 helicopters broke down en route. A third developed a hydraulic problem after landing. Now, they were down to 5 helicopters. The mission required a minimum of 6, so the commander, General James Vaught, called it off. And then, things got worse. During the withdrawal, a helicopter collided with a C-130 transport aircraft on the ground at the staging site in the Iranian desert. The aircraft exploded. 8 American servicemen were killed. And then they had to leave, leaving behind the burning wreckage, classified documents, and the bodies of 8 Americans on Iranian soil. Iran paraded everything on television. The images were humiliating. Carter's presidency never recovered. Many historians argue Eagle Claw cost him the 1980 election. But here's the thing. The mission failed not because the operators weren't brave or skilled. It failed because the plan was too complicated. The branches between different military branches were poorly coordinated, and nobody had a backup for the backup. After Eagle Claw, the U.S. completely overhauled its Special Operations structure. SOCOM, Special Operations Command, was eventually created specifically so this kind of inter-service disaster could never happen again. So Eagle Claw was a tragedy, but it made the whole Special Ops enterprise better. Yeah, that's a complicated legacy. Operation Anaconda, 2002. But speaking of complicated, Operation Anaconda is the one military planners still argue about in war colleges to this day. March 2002, Afghanistan. The Taliban has been routed, but al-Qaeda fighters are regrouping in the Shah-i-Qat Valley, a remote high-altitude mountain region. U.S. commanders believe there are about 200 fighters down there. Spoiler alert, there were a lot more than 200. The plan was for Afghan militias to push through the valley floor while U.S. forces set up blocking positions in the surrounding mountains to trap the enemy. Clean, simple, classic hammer and anvil. Except nothing went right. Afghan militia units stalled on the valley floor. Enemy numbers turned out to be closer to 1,000, and the high mountain positions, called the Finger, turned out to be defended by entrenched al-Qaeda fighters who had the high ground and were not leaving. One helicopter carrying a SEAL sniper team was hit by an RPG during an attempt to escape. Navy SEAL Neil Roberts fell out of the helicopter onto a ridgeline crawling with enemy fighters. The rescue attempt that followed, a series of helicopter assaults onto that ridgeline under fire, became one of the most intense close-quarter battles of the entire war. The battle eventually lasted 17 days. An estimated 500 al-Qaeda fighters were killed. The U.S. lost 8 soldiers. And the controversy? Commanders later admitted the intelligence was badly wrong. The enemy had more fighters, better weapons, and better defensive positions than anyone expected. The interagency coordination was a mess, and the air power that was supposed to be the great equalizer was slow to respond because of poor communication between ground troops and aircraft. The same problems as Eagle Claw, just 20 years later in a different desert. But the next one might be the most heartbreaking of all, because this one almost worked perfectly. Almost. The Son Tay Raid, 1970. November 1970, Vietnam War. Roughly 65 American POWs are being held at the Son Tay prison camp, 23 miles west of Hanoi, the capital of North Vietnam. U.S. intelligence has confirmed it. Prisoners are there, and they are being treated horrifically. So Special Forces Colonel Arthur Bull Simons leads 56 Green Berets on a daring nighttime helicopter assault directly into the camp. They land. They fight. They cleared the entire compound in under 30 minutes with 0 American fatalities. That is textbook. But here's the gut punch. The prisoners weren't there. They'd been moved to a different camp 4 months earlier due to flooding. U.S. intelligence never picked up on it. The raid that was executed almost flawlessly, 0 Americans killed, every objective hit on time, rescued exactly nobody. 56 of the most elite warriors in the world flew into the heart of North Vietnam and came back empty-handed. But here's the thing everyone forgets. The Son Tay raid still shook Hanoi to its core. North Vietnamese leadership suddenly realized their capital was not safe. They consolidated POWs into a single location, which actually improved conditions for many prisoners. And years later, multiple Vietnam POWs said that just knowing the US had tried, had come for them, gave them the will to survive. So yeah, no prisoners rescued, perfect execution, and somehow it still mattered. That's the thing about special ops. The line between legend and disaster is razor thin. These men trained for years, sacrificed everything, and operated in the places the rest of us never hear about. Some missions changed the course of history. Some ended in fire in an Iranian desert, and some succeeded so completely that they still came back with nothing. But every single one of them went anyway. And look, if this kind of history is your thing, you're gonna want to check this out next.